Okay, all right. So I'm told that most part of this training is going to be focused at clearing the professional exam for identity now, and also understanding identity now to a level where we can use this product in development or production environment, or we can start to use this product. Is my understanding right?
Yeah.
Okay. To me, it's just the one thing, because if you prepare for this exam, you will get to know everything about IDN. Or if you do the other way, if you just start to focus on IDN without thinking that you have to clear an exam, and if you have to appear for an exam, you will most likely clear it, right? So either way, it is going to be the same thing. What we are going to cover in this training is mostly around the is mostly everything about identity now, right? But specifically talking about it, that we'll talk about architecture first, then we'll talk about the identity management, which means that how identities are onboarded. Can you have multiple identities? What is the process of it? We will see it in the environment as well, to create those many screens, dashboards, login from different kind of users, have different kind of capabilities, things like that. Then we'll go towards certifications, policies. We'll also talk about access modeling, right? This is a little different from other products, I would say. So we'll talk about it thoroughly, that what levels of access you can have, and how those type of access models are granted from identity now. Then
Mm.
access request we'll talk about. We need to talk about password management. There are different processes: self-service, forgot password, help desk, synchronization, reverse synchronization, things like those. So we'll talk about that. Then there is another feature of search. This lets you search for keywords or search for data within identity now in a dynamic manner. So it's more like something like Google, that you type in something, and then based on the keyword search, it will return you the results. Since Sabri mentioned that he has some experience on reports, you should be very interested on the capabilities of search rather than writing custom reports and getting column by column after
Uh,
a day's
Actually,
struggle.
I just worked like in the manual, like for the aggregation, the termination report to cross verify with the workday to identify whether
Ah,
the
okay.
user got those kind of reports, not in depth one, right? So I just work for the pilot project actually. So yeah, I'm
Okay,
curious
okay.
to learn more about that. And one more thing, like Akash, so in this professional one, right? So it will cover the application management, like implementations and um, SSO enablements for the like integrations work. Do it will cover here or like how it will be worked out?
Yes, yes. It should be covered, because in order to do anything, you need to have, or you need to set up a certain data set in identity now,
Okay.
and the only way to do it is to aggregate from an end system. So we will talk about those things. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Thanks.
right. Then there are a few configuration items as well, which can be divided into global configuration or advanced configurations. Right? These headers are very much created in order to understand that what use case provides what, or what we should talk about when we talk about policies, right, or
Mm.
certification or identity management. But in my opinion, there should not be a set order in order to discuss this. We should cover certifications, policies towards the end of this training, but we should cover access modeling, access requests, password management, configuration items a little before this, right? So, all in all, we'll be covering everything in this week, but the order of it should be different in order to get the most out of it.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions before we start about the architecture and infrastructure aspects?
Uh, not now. Like once we get into that,
Yeah,
we
definitely
Right.
not now.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Just so you know that since we are going to be preparing for this exam, on several instances, I will go down how they usually ask questions because I myself have appeared for professional and engineer. Also, it's been a while I've been training people, so a lot of people have appeared for professional and cleared it. So we have a certain background at what questions are usually asked or what topics are usually asked based out of which we can infer that what questions could be prospects. So you know directly that half of the questions will be this, and you need to remember these things, right? So I will suggest you to quote down or note down those things, and then that can be your side notes. Well, when you prepare or you finally revise something from these slides, you have certain notes with you that what needs to be remembered or what needs to be passed on, because that's more of a topic for engineer exam and not for professional. All right, then we'll start with two PDFs. I have already sent you these. One is called IDN Essentials, the other is called IDN Advanced. Now, both of these are the standard SailPoint training programs that are usually run by SailPoint. Uh, I think this is for 12 hours, the other is also for 12 hours. That's what the SailPoint duration is. And then everything that has been asked as part of the essentials should be the prime focus as part of our training. But we also need to run through the advanced training guide because topics like search are of significance and should be
Akash, sorry to interrupt
yes.
you. Can you
Mhm.
just hold on for a second? I just need to restart Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, no
Just
problem.
give me
Yeah,
just give me 1 minute, okay?
yeah, sure.
I will rejoin, okay?
Okay.
and Akash, like before going to the document side, right? Can you take me through like overview about the portal things if you have the access? Like you can show us like what are the
About the
like
community.
services are there. Yeah, committee or any like portal where we will go for the implementations or doing some any like provisioning parts or those kind of stuff. Because before going to the documentation, if we have some overview like this, all the services are in the portal and what are the things we can do if we have some better idea, right? So I think that will be relate us easily.
All right. All right. Yep. So I think you mean something like probably. Uh, Let me just. You mean something like this? The environment.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. 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 I thought that I'll give you an overview of this right after we talk about a few things about the architecture or the
Okay,
infrastructure.
then
So
that's fine. That's
yeah.
fine actually. Yeah, I'm just just giving them no heads up on that. Like
Right, right. Don't worry about it. I have everything set up. So I have given it a thought that what we need to talk about, but I think we need to talk about a few things and then go towards the
okay,
a very high level overview of IDN, right? And then
yeah,
we'll start
yeah,
the towards the component based
Yeah,
architecture so
hi.
that you can create. Hello.
yeah, sure. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Sabri and I were talking about that we should also do a general overview of identity now from the dashboards perspective, that how to navigate, what to see, how it looks like. But I think first we need to talk about a few things around the infrastructure and architecture, and then we'll do it hand in hand. Right. So as I was saying that um, we need to primarily focus on the essentials. This itself is exhaustive. If you see, there are 374 screens to it, and then advanced is something that we need to refer from time to time, but we do not need to remember everything from the advanced slide at this moment if we are trying to prepare for the professional exam and then trying to have a decent understanding of identity now. Some of the things are pretty advanced, I would say, and does not need to be to be remembered at this point, but it's good to talk about those, which we will. Right. And since I have sent you this, you are most welcome to go through this on your own if you have time, or if you can skim through it if you have something to talk about before time, we can take that up as well. All right. So if you can understand, or if you already know that SailPoint offers multi-tenant architecture for identity now. So since you have Azure and Okta experience, I will rather ask this question that whether you know or whether you understand about the multi-tenancy of architecture, or should we talk about it?
Yeah, we know about it, like a multi-tenant
But I think
option.
yeah, you can touch base on the same. I think that
Yeah,
will be
Okay.
helpful.
Okay. Can one of you quickly help me understand what do you understand from it?
So basically, from my understanding, multi-tenant architecture is a kind of cloud-based architecture that is spanned over a lot of availability zones, so that the failover or failback or the DR kind of activities are much more easier.
Right. Yes. 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 That is pretty much it. But what we mean by multi-tenancy of architecture means that SailPoint Cloud is just one thing, right? Within which you have smaller tenants based on every organization residing into a particular cloud and the same cloud, which means that whether you are working for Microsoft or whether you are working for Google, if you have two identity now tenants, one for each organization, both will be sitting inside a particular SailPoint cloud. Okay. Now, SailPoint cloud can be understood as a global thing where there are multiple availability zones. Okay. Or you can also understand that there are many SailPoint clouds which are integrated towards each other, that in real time you will not understand that where you are sitting and what you are hitting and where the processing is happening in the background, right? But multi-tenancy specifically means that you need to, or SailPoint is structured in a way that there are multiple tenants. Tenant is corresponding to an organization. So there will be multiple identity now belonging to multiple clients, and that will be residing inside a particular SailPoint cloud. Okay, and then the SailPoint cloud is a universal thing. It is going to be one thing. Okay, so that's what is meant by multi-tenant architecture. Now, since we have one SailPoint cloud and multiple tenants, and every tenant need to have a certain kind of configuration or an implementation approach or different kind of source integrations, that means that there will be some specific services which is general to all, and there will be some services which is very much focused to a particular to a to a particular um, to a particular tenant in a way, right? This means that services like general maintenance, general refresh task, aggregation tasks, right? So these are very general configurations. It is going to be similar to every tenant or within the tenant, but there will be services like provisioning, password management, which you can understand that might be relevant to tenant one, but might not be relevant to tenant two, right? So those can be subscription based services, right? So foundational shared services are something which is free of cost, right? Or which is being managed by SailPoint Cloud, which is going to be universal to all of the tenants in most cases. But then again, there will be a lot of subscription based services, which will be very specific to a tenant, which means that you need to enable, disable these kind of services. And then based on your need, based on your requirements, those subscription services will be enabled to you and particularly to you for a given period of time, which means you need to purchase this from SailPoint probably for 1 year, and then for that many duration, the subscription will be enabled for your tenant. One such example is password management. You might need it for tenant 4, but does not for tenant 5, right? Since these are two different organizations and every organization have different requirements. So let's say tenant 4 is Microsoft, tenant 5 is Google. Microsoft uses Azure AD for password management, but tenant 5 uses SailPoint for password management, right? This is more towards the end user password management, not how you rotate the password or how you manage the password. So in that case, tenant 4 might not need password management module enabled, but tenant 5 would, right? So password management is a paid service, which means you have to get it enabled from SailPoint by paying additional module fee, and then you might be able to leverage it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. Since you mentioned, Shrejip, about the availability zones, there is a concept of availability zone. Currently, there are 5 availability zones. This does not show the fifth one, but the fifth one is more in the Asia Pacific. I think it's located in Australia. Okay. This means that in order to make identity now most efficient when it comes to accessing it from a particular geography or a particular location, it has been divided into 5 availability zones, so that if you're using, let's just say if you're sitting in Amsterdam and you are accessing identity now, you do not need, or SailPoint does not need you to connect to US West servers or US West architecture, but to the European availability zones. Okay, so this way the network and the latency effects will be reduced drastically. And if you're sitting probably in India, then you need to be connected to US West, right? So these availability zones
So
are
from
present.
India, it should be connected to US West.
No, I think so. It's more of a
Okay.
hypothesis. Yes.
Okay.
Now it is Asia Pacific. So, yeah, but I think geographically, US West is the closest if there is no Asia Pacific,
Okay. Yeah.
right? So, things like that. The intent is that SailPoint lets you or makes you connect to the servers which are closest to you, so that it can reduce the latency of the network side. Okay, and then all of this is completely managed by SailPoint. You do not need to do something on your own in order to see that what is easiest for you. This is handled dynamically, and this is completely being managed and controlled by SailPoint. Okay, so I think when you sign a contract with SailPoint, they usually decide on an availability zone. But then again, you will have global clients where offices will be present in different locations. So if you just stick uh, that my office is in Chicago and for me US East works best, but you have another office in Australia, that might not make the best sense. So in that case, your availability zones are scattered, and the users from particular geography gets connected to the closest availability zone. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so maybe this is something that you can note down. This is usually a prospective question that they directly ask you about the availability zone, what it means, okay, and then which of the following is not um a standard availability zone given by SailPoint, right? So they will give you different location names, probably country names, and then you will have to identify which is out of these 5 lists or which is not. Okay, so you have to revise slide number 3 in order to get that question right. Right now, it might seem super simple that you will remember this, but there might be a case that after listening and talking uh, to me for so many days, you might not have reference to this particular slide, and then you might slip it.
Yep, noted. Thank you, Akash.
All right. Now, needless to say, each zone hosts many tenants. That is very obvious. Since we have multi-tenant architecture, that means there will be multiple tenants in SailPoint Cloud, and the cloud is made of these many availability zones or data residency zones, right? Which means that every zone will also have multiple tenants. There will be multiple clients in California, and so there will be multiple tenants in this particular availability zone. Okay. Now, another thing to mention, tenant is more uh, corresponding to an organization. That doesn't mean that you have a production tenant, you have a development tenant, you have a testing tenant, and all of those are present in different, right? So, tenant needs to be corresponded to our knowledge of an organization. Any questions so far?
No, no, Akash.
Okay. Right. Now, let's talk about logistics as well. That there are usually two tenants which are given to an organization or to a customer: production and sandbox. Sandbox is mostly for creating your configuration, developing your implementation, testing out a
A
few
testing
things for your.
playground, you can say.
I would say more of more of real development environment where you create the configuration, you unit test your configuration, right, and then you move to production for that kind of uh, roll out to the customers or to the end users.
Now, I have a question here, Akash. So, if a
Mhm.
client isn't like there, I'm working for a client, consider a scenario, and there we require a proper agile process methodology is being followed. So, we will be needing a dev environment and a test environment and a QA, then a prod.
Right.
So, should we be given these things from perspective, or it's only a sandbox and production only?
Right. So let's take a value that for let's just say that you have 1,000 identities in your organization, and SailPoint costs 10,000 for a license for identity now, where they give you production and sandbox. Okay, but now you work in a validated environment. Maybe your client is a healthcare where you need everything to be validated and tested before it goes to end users, where you need a
Production,
testing and
yeah.
QA. Right. So those two tenants can be provisioned to you on additional cost, right? You will have to ask SailPoint, but then they will charge extra. How much, that is your deal with SailPoint, I would say. But
Okay.
nevertheless, you can have as many environments as you need, but those will be charged separately. That's the only caveat there,
Okay. Got it.
right? Now, just another thing there, you should also try to gain this perspective that since SailPoint provides you sandbox and production, there has to be a reason behind it, right? If you have experience or little bit experience of IIQ, you can understand that it's a very vast product. Means that it give it gives or provides you the flexibility of implementing anything you want. You can have custom connections. You can write integration executors to connect via SOAP or REST-based APIs, right? You have flexibility to write Java code and deploy as class files of your own and create custom integrations. You can write custom reports in order to collate data in a way that SailPoint does not provide out of the box, right? Those things are provided in SailPoint IAQ, or that flexibility is provided. So you need to understand a lot towards Java or XML or JavaScript in order to work with that product, right? But for identity now, it's mostly configurable in a way that the scope of customizing a particular requirement is very limited. Okay. And since it is limited, SailPoint does not promote you or motivate you to do those kind of customizations. There are several reasons behind it. There are several checks and balances behind it. You will learn each of it, but I think you will have to condense that knowledge within yourself, that it is a product which provides you a lot of configurations, a lot of ways of doing it, but then there is a certain way of doing it. And then if you have to go beyond it, then you have very limited options of doing it. Okay. Since it does not provide you a lot of customizable features, you always do not need a testing or a QA environment, because the configurations are well validated by SailPoint, and then those validations, since are already being done by SailPoint, you do not need to do it again in a particular environment. That can only be unit tested in sandbox, and that should be well enough. Well, that's not what I say. That's what SailPoint says as about their product, right? And this is something that we should listen to. And whenever you think that this needs to be tested, there will always be a reason that why it does not need to be tested. Does that make sense? I know it will, you will not be fully convinced with that, but in time you should also see that how many limitations are there or what kind of configurations are there, so that you can be relieved about it.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right. So coming back to Sandbox, it provides you a way to implement or to create or develop any kind of configuration on a particular data set, on a limited data set, I would say. So it's not as scalable as production can be, right? You cannot have unlimited amount of identities or application integrations or endpoint integrations. It basically gives you 1,000 identities in most cases, and then those 1,000 and if you go beyond those 1,000 identities, you usually get an error. And if you need more than 1,000 identities, you can just write an email to SailPoint to extend that limit in your tenant, and then you can have 1,500 if they allow you to be, right? So everything is subject to an approval from SailPoint on most things. If you need to extend something, if you need to customize something in your tenant, you always need to vet it out with SailPoint, right? Coming back to production.
Yeah, actually, generally
Yes.
what happens is scaling 1,000 customers, 1,000 users on a sandbox environment. So after that, when you try scaling or do some performance testings, that whether the load of the whole users or the load of the whole things in production is able to cope with the given infrastructure from SailPoint Identity now is possible or not. So in that case, we have to like increase the limit of the identities in the sandbox environment.
Right. So there is no question on the infrastructure in that case, right? Because SailPoint provides you a cloud. That means that it can dynamically provide you unlimited processing power or space in order to process those many identities at once, or to keep that identity in that tenant, right? So from an infrastructure standpoint, you are covered there, right? Because you do not need to test the scalability, whether your system will be slowed down or something. That's called as microservices. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. But since you understand that there is not just one tenant in the SailPoint cloud, and the SailPoint cloud is very big. So if you need more services than you require, then SailPoint will dynamically allot those services to your particular tenant. So scalability will never be a problem,
Okay.
right? But then again, there will be a lot of factors that might need to be tested when it comes to just testing your solution for a little over 1,000 identities than a million identities, right? A few customers might have a million identities, right? Like big banks or big pharmaceuticals, and testing it on just 1,000 sometimes does not seem fair because you can have multiple identity sources or authoritative sources, multiple endpoints, right? Thousands of applications. So in that case, you can always reach out to SailPoint to extend your limit. Okay, since we are
So
talking about,
is
yeah,
is this
go on.
going to be a question like the how much identities are limited to sandbox? Can we
No,
consider this
no,
as a question?
no.
Okay.
So there is, this is what my next point is. So there is a catch to this. When we say, um, when we prepare or procure SailPoint environments, your cost is defined per identity. Okay, so SailPoint basically tells you that how many identities do you need to work upon in production environment. Based on it, we will create the cost. So let's just say you say I need 1,000 identities, and every identity costs €30, $30 per license, right? So then your cost will be 30 into 1,000.
I got it. Yeah.
If right now there is a catch to it. This limit over which your license will be filled or you will start facing errors, there are two things that you need to remember. One is called a tenant limit, one is called a license limit. Okay, so just remember these two words. We'll talk about it in a little while.
So what are the types of licenses there is?
There's just one license. There are no types of licenses. There will be
Mm-hmm.
different modules that you need to enable. But yes, those are not called as licenses. Those are called paid services or subscription based services.
Okay.
All right, makes sense up until now. I know we have left a few questions open, but we'll close them. Okay, now let's talk about the architecture as well. Up until now, we have seen something like this, right? Which is very superficial. There is a cloud, there are multiple tenants, right? And there are foundational and shared services. Foundational services and subscription services, right? Now let's look at this one. This cloud, this tenant is divided into multiple components. One is called UI, one is called REST API, one are called microservices. Okay. And then this is again communicating to another component called virtual appliance, right? And these can be called as a few shared services, right? That the tenant monitoring will be present for all the tenants in a cloud. The notification services or deployment services will be present common to all the tenants, right? These microservices are also shared services as well as paid services. But we need to understand this uh, in a little granular manner, right? So before we start about this, does anyone understand microservices? What do you mean by it?
Is it kind of any maintenance or something?
Okay. So basically, microservices means that the
Basically,
services.
an architecture generally like that follows some what was it called? Uh, so it follows some kind of I forgot actually the term. So basically, it's an architectural platform or organizational approach for kind of software developments.
Yes, yes. In a way, you can say that. So microservices, as it
And
says,
they
micro.
can communicate through APIs.
Yep. Yes. So yeah, that pretty much says everything about this block. That microservices are services, right? They can be shared or they can be subscription, right? But they are microservices, which means that every tenant will have access to microservices. Now let's take two microservices. One is called aggregation, one is called provisioning. Aggregation is a shared microservice. That means it is available to all free of cost. Okay, you do not need to purchase any kind of module or anything like that in order to make use of aggregation feature, but you do need to uh, get the provisioning module enabled in your tenant to make use of the provisioning, which means creating user or maintaining users access, right? Both of these are called microservices. Now, if, for example, there are multiple tenants inside the SailPoint cloud, right? So these microservices are going to cater to all of these tenants if they are shared services, right? You agree with that?
Can you repeat that once again, Akash?
Right. So I'm saying that if there are multiple tenants in the cloud, which there are, right? Because it's a multi-tenant architecture, if there is a service called aggregation, right? That should be common to all of the tenants because it's a shared service.
Okay.
Do you agree with it?
Yeah.
Right. Now there will be a case that all the tenants or some of the tenants are aggregating a system where there are thousands of users and access. Let's just say Active Directory. There are 40,000 groups, there are 40,000 users that are being aggregated, right? And then the aggregation is also shared. So if other tenants are also aggregating from a heavy load system, then your aggregation is supposed to be very slow and inefficient, right? Now, Shrujit, this is where your question arises that we should test the load. We need to be sure that how we scale this from 1,000 users to a million users, from sandbox to production, right? But the answer to that is that these microservices are dynamically allotted to tenants. So if there is a tenant which usually aggregates 1,000 records every day, but you did something new or you did something wrong, and now it is going to aggregate a million records from Active Directory. In that case, more microservices will be allocated dynamically to this particular tenant so that the scalability is maintained, right? It does not face latency, it does not face slowness, or it does not explode because of more load than it can take. Okay, so short answer is that not just one microservice block, but multiple microservices block for aggregation will be allocated to a particular tenant. If there is more load, then it expects it to be. Okay, all of that happens and being controlled by SailPoint, so you do not have to worry about scalability of a solution. Make sense?
Yeah. Got it.
Okay. Similarly goes for any kind of services like provisioning, password management. If usually 5 users change their password at once and on a particular day 50 comes, right? More microservices will be allocated to that particular service. Uh, and it will be catered like like usually, right? So the end user will not face that, oh no, today it is slow than usual. Maybe more people are working over it. So that doesn't happen in real time. Okay. That's what SailPoint claims, right? But you always know that what products claim are sometimes not being adhered to or not being catered to. So sometimes you will face slowness in the environment because they are doing something in the background, right? But that happens once in a while. Okay, now these microservices can be interacted using UI, which is the identity now application or the dashboard service, right? And then identity now is a cloud product, so it also provides a REST API framework, which means that you can communicate to the cloud using the REST API, right? So there will be a few REST APIs given by identity now. You can make use of those to directly call the services or perform operations or communicate to the SailPoint cloud or to other inbuilt components without having the need of using the UI. Okay, so a particular tenant is built off a UI feature, a REST API framework, which can interact with microservices and also with this so-called inbuilt component called virtual appliance, which is the other security component. Is the SailPoint cloud clear now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we might have some things to come after some time, but okay,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
now it's okay.
definitely. Yep. Okay, right. So for now, just understand that this SailPoint cloud, right? It offers you a tenant and microservices, right? Tenant is made up of UI and REST API, and microservices are something that can be interacted with both UI and REST API. Okay.
Yeah. Akash, can you give a break for 5-10 minutes? Is that possible?
Um, let's just quickly talk about virtual appliance on a very high level, and then we can go on a break for 15
Okay.
minutes if you want. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So now the other component is virtual appliance, which has a little bit of more boxes than the SailPoint cloud has. Now, does anyone has heard of virtual appliance? Or since you have worked on Okta or Azure, how do you integrate with other systems? Any understanding of it?
Not in deeply actually, because yeah, in
Yeah.
Azure we
Okay.
just
Basically,
work for
Okay.
the
that
implementation side,
virtual
right? So
appliances are like what it is called. It's like they are running on a virtual virtual machine based image, and they are pre-configured there. Is that
Right.
fine?
Yes, yes, yes. So that's what a virtual appliance means, right? Now, what is the significance of virtual appliance in identity now architecture is that everything is cloud, right? But you always need to connect
They are
to
available
the
on demand, basically, right?
what is available on demand.
So I think virtual appliances are convenient and they are like readily available whenever you want it.
No, no, no. So no. So it's not use and collapse. I mean, it can be. You can create it that way, right? But virtual appliance means a little different. Maybe in IG world or for identity now, it basically means in order to communicate to any on-premise solution or any on-premise system, you need a component that needs to be present inside the client network, right? So let's just say that you're working with KPMG, right, as service providers, and then you use identity now as a solution to serve, let's just say, SoftBank. Okay. Now, SoftBank has 10 applications that needs to be integrated with identity now, where you need to do identity management, access management, and other use cases, right? Since identity now is just cloud, right? And these 10 applications sit inside a particular network, right, which is the SoftBank's network. In order to connect to these on-premise networks, you need a thing called virtual appliance that you need to set up in the SoftBank's network in order for identity now to communicate to this virtual appliance, and then virtual appliance communicates to the enterprise connectors or the on-premise applications. Okay, so you can think of it as a gateway which communicates to the cloud and as well as to the on-premise systems that needs to be integrated to the cloud. If you can look up this image, right, this is something that we need to install on a server which is present in the boundary of the network or within the boundary of the network, and this virtual appliance manages these kinds of connectors, right? If we need to connect to a database, we can't just directly connect this database to Identity Now Cloud or SailPoint Cloud, right? We need to set up a virtual appliance which can communicate to that database, and virtual appliance also communicates to the SailPoint Cloud. So it creates a gateway, a mediation service which can understand cloud as well as the on-premise system. Does that make sense?